Ambassador Krelthax adjusted his ceremonial robes as the shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. He had studied humans for 3 standard cycles before this mission, yet nothing in the archives had prepared him for what he was about to discover. The Galactic Confederation had sent him to establish formal relations with this newly contacted species, and the Council expected a simple evaluation. Humans were primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was barely capable of interstellar travel. How complicated could their governance possibly be? The shuttle touched down on a platform outside a massive white building. Krelthax stepped out, his forelegs clicking against the smooth stone. A delegation of humans waited for him, led by a female with gray hair and a warm smile. She introduced herself as Secretary Morrison, and she would be his guide through the human political system. The first meeting took place in a grand room filled with wooden desks arranged in a half-circle. Hundreds of humans sat in these seats, arguing loudly with each other. Krelthax watched in confusion as they shouted, pointed fingers, and sometimes laughed at their opponents. His translator struggled to keep up with the rapid exchanges. Secretary Morrison leaned close to him. She explained that this was their Congress, where representatives from different regions debated laws. No single person could create a law alone. It required the agreement of many. Krelthax found this inefficient. In the Confederation, the High Council simply declared laws, and citizens obeyed. There was no need for debate. The Council knew what was best. He made a note in his datapad about human inefficiency. The next day, Secretary Morrison took him to meet the President. Krelthax expected a throne room, perhaps a palace filled with guards and symbols of absolute power. Instead, he found a simple office. The President was a tall man with tired eyes who shook his hand firmly. They spoke for an hour about trade agreements and cultural exchange. Near the end of the meeting, Krelthax asked a question that had been bothering him. He wanted to know how long this president had ruled. The president laughed and said he had been in office for 5 years and would leave in 3 more. His term was limited. Krelthax did not understand. He asked what would happen after the president left. Would his son take over? Would there be a war of succession? The president shook his head. He explained that the people would vote for a new leader. Anyone could run for the position. Power was transferred peacefully, and the old president became an ordinary citizen again. This concept shocked Krelthax deeply. In the Confederation, rulers served for life. Their children inherited power after them. The idea of voluntarily giving up control seemed like madness. Why would anyone build a system designed to remove its own leaders? Secretary Morrison took him to a different building the next morning. This one housed what humans called the Supreme Court. 9 individuals in black robes sat at a high bench, listening to arguments from lawyers below. Krelthax learned that these judges could strike down any law, even laws made by the Congress, even orders from the president himself. He felt his heart racing. This was dangerous. He asked Secretary Morrison why the president did not simply replace these judges with loyal supporters. She explained that judges served for life and could not be removed easily. The president could only appoint new judges when old ones died or retired. Krelthax made more notes. The human system seemed designed to fail. There were too many competing powers. No one had complete control. How did anything get accomplished? Over the following weeks, Krelthax traveled across the planet. He visited local governments, state capitals, and municipal councils. Everywhere he went, he found the same pattern. Power was divided and subdivided endlessly. Different branches checked each other. Leaders were replaced regularly. Citizens had rights that even the highest authorities could not violate. He met a human historian named Dr. Chun, who agreed to explain the reasoning behind this strange system. They sat in a quiet library, surrounded by old books and the smell of paper. Dr. Chun spoke slowly, knowing that the alien needed time to process these concepts. Humans had learned from their history, she said. They had experienced tyrants, dictators, and emperors. They knew what happened when too much power concentrated in one place. Leaders became corrupt. They hurt their own people. They started wars for personal glory. The results were always suffering and death. So humans had designed their governments with intentional weaknesses. They built in failure points on purpose. If any single person or group tried to take complete control, the system would resist. Other branches would push back. The courts would intervene. The people would vote the tyrants out. Krelthax argued that this made the government slow and inefficient. Dr. Chun agreed. That was the point. A government that could act quickly could also destroy quickly. By making change difficult, humans protected themselves from their own worst impulses. She showed him documents from their history, constitutions and declarations that limited governmental power, amendments that guaranteed individual freedoms, systems of appeals and reviews that prevented hasty judgments. Every layer was designed to slow things down, to force consideration, to prevent catastrophe. Krelthax returned to his quarters that night with a troubled mind. He thought about the Confederation, about the High Council that had ruled for 10,000 years. The council was efficient. Decisions came quickly. But he also remembered the purges, the disappeared colonies, the species that had questioned council authority and been erased from history. The humans knew something his people had forgotten. Power corrupted. Absolute power corrupted absolutely. By building weakness into their systems, humans protected themselves from the darkness that lived in every intelligent heart. He contacted his superiors and requested an extended stay. There was much more to learn here. Months passed. Krelthax observed elections where ordinary citizens chose their leaders. He watched peaceful transitions of power that would have caused civil wars in the Confederation. He saw courts protecting the rights of individuals against the wishes of majorities. He witnessed governments shutting down completely because different branches could not agree, and somehow the nation continued functioning. The humans called these events crises. Krelthax saw them differently. Each crisis was the system working as intended. Failure points activating to prevent something worse. The machine grinding to a halt before it could run off a cliff. He attended a university lecture about governmental theory. The professor explained something called federalism, where power was divided between central and local governments. Neither could completely control the other. Both competed for the loyalty of citizens. This competition kept both honest. A student asked what happened when the system failed completely. The professor smiled sadly. He said that it had failed before and would fail again. But built into the system were methods for recovery. Impeachment removed corrupt leaders. Constitutional amendments fixed broken rules. Revolution remained an option of last resort. The system assumed its own imperfection and planned for repair. Krelthax thought about the Confederation again. When their system failed, there was no recovery mechanism. The council simply silenced opposition and continued as before. Problems accumulated until they became catastrophes. But humans expected failure. They welcomed it as a learning opportunity. He requested a meeting with Secretary Morrison before his departure. They sat in a garden filled with flowering plants, drinking a warm beverage the humans called tea. Krelthax asked the question that had haunted him throughout his visit. Why did humans trust each other so little that they needed all these safeguards? Secretary Morrison set down her cup. She said that humans trusted each other deeply in personal relationships. Families cared for each other. Friends sacrificed for each other. Communities came together in times of crisis. But when it came to power over others, humans did not trust themselves. They knew that good people could make terrible decisions when they had too much authority. The safeguards were not about distrust. They were about humility. Krelthax asked her to explain further. She said that humans understood their own weakness. They knew they could be seduced by power, corrupted by fear, blinded by hatred. So they built systems that protected them from themselves. Every check and balance was a confession of human frailty and a commitment to overcoming it. The ambassador found this answer profound. His people believed in the perfectibility of leaders. They trusted the council to always choose wisely. But humans assumed that everyone could fail, including themselves, and they planned accordingly. On his final day on Earth, Krelthax toured a museum dedicated to human governmental history. He saw documents written centuries ago that still limited modern leaders. He read about tyrants who had risen and fallen because the system eventually corrected itself. He studied revolutions that had overthrown oppressors and established new systems with even more safeguards. One display caught his attention. It showed the same governmental crisis playing out across different eras. Each time, the system seemed about to collapse completely. Each time, the failure points activated and prevented the worst outcomes. The pattern repeated again and again throughout human history. He realized that humans had essentially domesticated chaos. They had accepted that conflict was inevitable and channeled it into productive competition between governmental branches. Every argument in their Congress, every court case challenging a law, every election replacing a leader was controlled chaos. Energy that might have caused revolutions or civil wars was instead directed into peaceful channels. Krelthax prepared his final report for the High Council. He knew they would not appreciate his conclusions. They would see human governance as primitive and inefficient. They would laugh at the intentional weaknesses and multiple failure points. But Krelthax had seen something the Council could not understand. He had seen a species that had conquered its own worst nature through deliberate self-limitation. Humans were not weak because they divided their power. They were strong because they acknowledged their capacity for evil and built defenses against it. His report recommended close observation of human governmental systems. It suggested that the Confederation might learn something from these strange beings who distrusted their own leaders. It warned that humans were far more sophisticated than their primitive technology suggested. The Council would probably ignore his recommendations. They always did when subordinates challenged their wisdom. But Krelthax had changed. He no longer saw efficiency as the highest value. He understood now that stability and justice mattered more than speed. As his shuttle left Earth's atmosphere, the ambassador looked down at the blue and green planets spinning slowly below. Somewhere down there, humans were arguing in their Congress, challenging laws in their courts, and preparing to replace their leaders through peaceful elections. Their government was a beautiful mess of competing powers and intentional failures. And it had endured for centuries because of those very weaknesses. Krelthax settled into his seat for the long journey home. He had come to Earth expecting to find primitives. Instead, he had discovered teachers. The lesson they taught was simple but revolutionary. True strength came not from accumulating power but from knowing when to limit it. True wisdom came not from trusting in perfect leaders but from building systems that assumed imperfection. True freedom came not from efficient government, but from governmental inefficiency that prevented tyranny. The humans had figured this out through centuries of painful trial and error. They had encoded their hard-won wisdom into constitutions and laws and traditions. And they had created something the Galactic Confederation, with all its advanced technology, had never achieved. A government designed to fail in exactly the right ways, at exactly the right times, to prevent the failures that truly mattered.